In this story from Holiness History, I want to go back to the Second Great Awakening. Now remember, this preceded the Holiness Movement. The Holiness Movement came out of the Second Great Awakening. They overlapped just a little bit. But you really have to understand the Second Great Awakening. In order to understand the movement, you need to understand the historical context, the spiritual climate, the way the denominations were at that time, and how they worked together. So let's go back to Peter Cartwright, who says that in 1801, for years, a blessed revival of religion spread through almost the entire inhabited parts of the West, Kentucky, Tennessee, the Carolinas, and many other parts. The Presbyterians and Methodists, in great measure, united in this work, met together, prayed together, and preached together. In this revival originated our camp meetings. Now, that's very significant because the Holiness Movement originally was a series of camp meetings for the promotion of holiness. These were held about every year. He goes on to talk about how they made the building, how it would fit about 5,000 people, how, this is my favorite part, 10, 20, and sometimes 30 ministers of different denominations would come together and preach night and day, 4 or 5 days together, and indeed, I've known these camp meetings to last 3 or 4 weeks. A great good resulted from them. I love the fact that the different denominations were willing to come together to share the gospel with their part of the country. I have seen more than 100 sinners fall like dead men under one powerful sermon, and I have seen and heard more than 500 Christians all shouting aloud the high praises of God at once. Now I want to get more into this shouting, because this was not in Christianity. Now this is like Pentecostal shouting, so dancing, spinning in circles, these kinds of physical demonstrations of worship. This was not in Christianity until about this period. I probably started at the 1700s and became more mainline in 1800s in meetings like this. This is not in church history. This is not in the Bible. So it's very interesting to watch how this formed and came to be, and how it was accepted, and what they thought of it back then when it began. In this revival, usually termed in the West the Cumberland Revival, many joined the different churches, especially the Methodists and Cumberland Presbyterians. The Baptists also came for their share of converts. In the midst of our controversies on the subject of powerful exercises among the people under preaching, a new exercise broke out among us, called the jerks, which was overwhelming in its effects upon the bodies and minds of the people. No matter if they were saints or sinners, they would be taken under a worm song or sermon and seized with a convulsive jerking all over, which they could not by any possibility avoid, and the more they resisted, the more they jerked. If they would not strive against it and pray in good earnest, the jerking would usually abate. I've seen more than 500 persons jerking all at one time in my large congregations. Most usually persons taken with the jerks, to obtain relief, as they said, would rise up and dance. Some would run, but could not get away. Some would resist. On such the jerks were generally very severe. To see those proud young gentlemen and young ladies, dressed in their silks, jewelry, and prunella from top to toe, take the jerks, would often excite my sensibilities. The first jerk or so, you would see their fine bonnets, caps, and combs fly, and so sudden would be the jerking of the head that their long loose hair would whip as loud as a Wagner's whip. At one of my appointments in 1804, so he's about 19 years old at this point, there was a very large congregation turned out to hear the Kentucky boy, as they called me. Among the rest, there were 2 very finely dressed, fashionable young ladies, attended by 2 brothers with loaded horsewhips. Although the house was large, it was crowded. The 2 young ladies, coming in late, took their seats near where I stood, and their 2 brothers stood in the door. I was a little unwell and had a vial of peppermint oil in my pocket. Before I commenced preaching, I took out my vial and swallowed a little of the peppermint. While I was preaching, the congregation melted into tears. the two young gentlemen moved off to the yard fence, and both the young ladies took the jerks, and they were greatly mortified. There was a great stir in the congregation. Some wept, some shouted, and before our meeting closed, several were converted. As I dismissed the assembly, a man stepped up to me and warned me to keep on my guard, for he had heard the two brothers swear that they would horsewhip me when the meeting was out for giving their sisters the jerks. "Well," said I, "I'll see to that." I went out and said to the young men that I understood intended to horsewhip me for giving their sisters the jerks. One replied that he did intend to do so. I understood to expostulate to them on the absurdity of the charge against me, but he swore I need not deny it, for he had seen me take out a vial in which I carried some trick and give his sisters the jerks. As quick as I thought, it came to my mind how I could get clear of my whipping, and jerking out the peppermint vial, said I, "Yes, if I gave your sisters the jerks, I'll give them to you too." In a moment, I saw he was scared. I moved toward him, he backed, I advanced, and he wheeled and ran, warning me not to come near him or he would kill me. I had raised the laugh on him, and I escaped my whipping. I had the pleasure, before the year was out, of seeing all four soundly converted to God, and I took them into the church. So there you have it. There is the jerks that came and just seized the congregations. And Peter Cartwright seems like he's always getting out of a whipping. The American culture of that day was very interesting in how they handled their disputes. So welcome to America in 1804. Thank you so much for watching this, and next time I will return to tell you another story about the jerks.